You mentioned how Xi Jinping talks about, the world order. You talk a lot about how the story of the two Michaels in Hmong, it gets kind of wrapped up into the story of who controls the global internet. What do you mean by that?
Well, what we mean by that is that we're entering a world where the internet is essentially going to be mobile through 5G, and Huawei is one of the very big players in telecommunications technology. The two other big companies, hate to tell you this, guys, because I know you're Americans, but it's Nokia, which is a Finnish company, and Ericsson, which is a Swedish company, and they're the other world leaders in 5G. And Huawei has commandeered the global market. They've also developed much of the intellectual property for 6G, which is going to be even faster than 5G. They control something like 60% of some of the key patents for that technology. They control a lot of the standards for wireless technology, and so a key part of this story is the battle between the United States and China for dominance in this space, which is the cutting edge of everything. Particularly as we move to the Internet of Things, 5G is going to be absolutely critical there. And, one of the reasons why, Huawei, which was doing a pretty healthy business in the United States, ran afoul of your Justice Department and your authorities was, they were using their position here, their beachhead, to get into your networks and control your networks, and they were also doing a very healthy business in Canada. We sort of talk about this in the book, and they weren't always playing above board either, and so we talk about that, and that's kind of how this case began, was that Huawei was running afoul of U.S. authorities, and they were also violating, through their subsidiary Skylink, the sanctions against Iran, and so that's how this happened. So there's a bigger story here, and we tell it in the book about Huawei and trade wars, and yet, as we can see in these kinds of epic battles, there's always a human dimension, and Mang and the two Michaels are really the human aspect of the story. It's and they're in some ways the two Michaels, the collateral damage in it.
Well, it definitely was a fascinating book. We'll put a link to it in the description below on the podcast so viewers can check it out. Thanks so much for joining us. Again, congratulations on the book and the conveniently timed ending that you guys got.
Yeah, it was all prearranged, but we'll tell you about that some later.
Okay, that's the next book. But yeah, pleasure having you on. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I totally think these guys had something to do with the resolution of the Meng Wanzhou thing, because come on.
The timing is just too perfect.
It's too perfect.
It's like when a story gets updated right as we're about to finish headlines that week. And it's just perfect timing.
Yeah, and you're glad that it didn't get updated like 2 hours later.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
To go back and record. Yeah.
Are we talking about anything in particular?
Yeah.
Some things.
It's never happened, just
That is the hard thing about any kind of like coverage of current events. Like imagine if this book had come out like a week earlier. That would have been like, oh boy.
But a lot of timing things are interesting about how things get covered in the media. Like a lot of news or like bad things the Chinese Communist Party does, they try to time it like right around Christmas
Yeah.
Because reporters are busy, and then
they arrested Liu Xiaobo on Christmas Day or something like that.
She'd been naughty.
Well, I mean, oh, Matt.
No, he hadn't been. He was Nobel Prize winner. Anyway, go on.
Well, Matt, you make the point. Timing is very important.
Yes.
Well, one thing about the timing of this case that's interesting is I think Fen had mentioned that the Biden administration had offered this deferred prosecution deal to Meng Wanzhou, but then it came out that the Trump administration had also offered, the Trump Justice Department had offered this deferred prosecution, but she didn't want to take it because it would mean that she had to formally admit guilt. Like, she basically had to say that she did the things that the U.S. government was accusing her of, which was misleading, banks about China, about Huawei's, lying basically about Huawei's business deals in Iran.
And she did have to admit some kind of wrongdoing. She admitted wrongdoing without guilt or something.
Well, yeah, she basically had to say that she did what the prosecution was accusing her of. But what happened was she didn't want to do it earlier, and then probably through the months of this long extradition trial that Mike had mentioned that had been dragging on, that she realized that this is actually going to be harder to get out of than she thought.
The U.S. and Canada wouldn't just cave.
Right.
Yeah, I felt bad for her because she was holed up at her $1 million mansion in Canada.
Well, I feel a little bad for her because of her relationship with her father.
I too feel bad for her on that count.
It is interesting what they were saying about she goes back and then you have to watch whether she comes out again, right?
Yeah, because I'm sure the Communist Party was not happy about being forced into this situation.
And, she went back to work officially, but who knows what happens next? Because that's probably the last high-profile thing that she really had to do, is officially go back to work, right?
For a father who doesn't believe in her.
Wow. Anyway, I mean, also probably the two Michaels suffered a little bit.
There's actually a lot of detail in the book about, what they went through in prison and how I think Michael Kovrig spent the first 6 months in solitary confinement, and they weren't allowed any communication with the outside world at first. They weren't allowed books or anything, and then eventually they were allowed books and letters, and that was their only kind of connection to the outside world. I think eventually they got some Chinese cellmates too, so they weren't just in solitary. But it does not sound like a good time. And
I hope he got to read Xi Jinping's book, The Governance of China, and The Governance of China, Volume 2.
I don't remember. It actually lists some of the books that they requested. I don't remember all of them, but I do remember pretty clearly that Michael Kovrig had requested Marcus Aurelius, like the Stoic.
I guess that's very appropriate.
Wow.
Yeah, right?
Meditations.
Yeah.
Well, hey, speaking of great books to read while you're imprisoned by the Chinese Communist Party, The Two Michaels, check it out. It is, Madeleine Albright says it's a gripping human drama. That's a recommendation, unless you don't take our recommendation as above Madeleine Albright's. Anyways, link is below. Thanks for watching China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Ganesta.
I'll talk to you next time.